This is Nathan Simmons, and on this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make appointment calls on the Agent Assist mobile app. So, I'm just going to go ahead and get rolling into the video here. So, guys, on the making appointment calls is going to be very similar to making other calls, but I do want to kind of show you some tips and tricks that can make your appointment call labs more efficient and a little bit more, or excuse me, less time consuming. And so, first off, I'll say there are two things that I always try to do whenever I'm going through an appointment call lab, or I encourage people to do. And that is to make sure that you have your filters set in a certain way to make it the most efficient use of your time. So, if you notice here, I've got an example showing you a bunch of different leads, and I've got leads that are maybe at the DM2 stage, and I've got some leads that are qualified, and I've even got some leads that are new leads. You can see those are the different indicators showing there on the left of each of the business names, and I have another video that explains what those mean. So I won't go into that now. Just make sure you watch my other videos. But there are two things that I always try to make sure that are filtered when I'm going through an appointment call lab. And so by doing so, I'm going to hit the filter button, just a little funnel there. And when I'm going into an appointment call lab, I want to be calling a certain type of lead. I want to filter my leads to where I have it showing me just my qualified leads. I don't want to look at my new leads because I haven't qualified them yet. If I call my new leads during an appointment call lab, then I'm going to be trying to set an appointment with somebody with a decision maker that I haven't verified yet. I may be asking for the wrong person. So I want to make sure that the people that I'm having show up when I have my appointment call lab at my district, wherever it may be, I'm going to want to make sure I'm calling the qualified leads, the leads that I know I verified the decision maker, I know they've got the right employees, and I know they're at the correct address, because those are the three things that we verify whenever we're doing that first part of our qualifying calls, right? And so that would be the first thing is, to make sure that I've got the qualified lead thing set as well. And then the next is where the drop down arrow where it says show all leads. I always have that selected under oldest activity, and I'll explain that a little bit more. But essentially, what that filter is going to do is always going to put the activity that is the oldest at the bottom of the list. That way, you're not having to worry about who you just called last. And as you're going through a call lab, sometimes that can get a little confusing here and there. So I'm going to minimize the map just to make the screen a little bit bigger, just to make it a little bit easier to see here. But you can see, all of the leads now that I've filtered it to show me my qualified leads all have a queue there. And so I don't have a whole lot here, but for the sake of this example, this will work just fine. And so I can essentially, as I'm coming in, let's say it's a Friday morning, we're having our Friday morning call lab in my district. I'm just going to sit down and I'm going to start calling. And hopefully I have more than 14 or 15 qualified leads, and hopefully I've got 100 or so, or more, because I'm going to be calling for a few hours. And I just start at the very top, and I can filter my leads even further by using the search box and finding maybe a certain area. Maybe I'm going to already be somewhere. Yeah, I can certainly do all those things. But very simply, I could make a phone call by simply swiping right and by hitting call, and it would immediately take me to the call area. That's one way to just start calling. That's something that's actually really quick. But what I'm going to do is, let's say this very first business, Square, Cloud, and Winery. So I'm going to select that business, and then I scroll down, and it says the decision maker's name is Jackson Anderson, and there's the phone number. And so I know I'm going to be calling to ask for Jackson. And so let's say I make that phone call, and the phone call's over with. But let's say the decision maker wasn't in. Well, all I've got to simply do is spoke to a non-decision maker. Say I called and I asked, hey, can I speak to Jackson? And I was told Jackson's not in today. So, okay, thank you for your time. And then, maybe I left him a message. That's good. But most likely, I can just put spoke to non-decision maker, and I can put other activity if I need to. I can put who I spoke with. I can do all those things. But as I've mentioned on previous videos, if you notice down at the bottom of the screen, there's two options. You can either save the activity that you just completed, or you can save the activity that you just completed and then add another one. And the adding another activity is simply going to be when you need to put something in the calendar that you need to be reminded of. And I will say personally, this is not one of those instances. Let's say I call them on a Friday morning and I know I'm going to call them again, probably my next call lab, because I wasn't able to get a hold of them on Monday or on Friday. I know I'm going to turn around and I'm going to call them again on Monday, but I probably don't have a specific time that I'm going to do that. And so, because if I hit save and add a next activity, what's going to happen is it's going to make me put what is that next activity that you're wanting to add. So I could put call and let's say, all right, well, hey, I want to call this person back on, Monday at 10 a.m. Or excuse me, let's say Monday at 2 p.m. during our afternoon call out. And I want to call Jackson again and I'm going to hit save an activity. Well, you can certainly do that if you want to be reminded to call Jackson again. But think about how many phone calls you're going to make. If you do that for every single callback, then if I go to my calendar here and I go to May 24th, there's that 2 p.m. call that I just put in the calendar. I'm going to have a whole lot of those on my calendar about being reminded to call somebody. And, that's for me, that would be overwhelming. Now, if there is a specific time that you maybe need to call somebody, or maybe a gatekeeper told you, hey, this person's only in on such and such date and time, that would make sense and something that, hey, I might want to put that in my calendar, something I need to be reminded of. And that's simply put how I use the add a next activity button is if there's something that I feel like needs to go in the calendar to remind me that it's going to happen or it needs to happen, that's when I use that. If I don't need to be reminded of it and I'm just going to do it at some point, then I simply just save the activity. So hopefully that makes sense. And so when I go back, you know, you notice that square cloud group has now disappeared. Well, if you remember, I've got my leads filtered to only show qualified leads. Well, when I had this filtered to show me my oldest activity, because I just completed the phone call, it should drop down to the very bottom of this list. And there it is. There's a Square Cloud and Winery down at the very bottom of the list. So that allows me, as I'm going through a call lab, I could just continuously keep clicking on the one that's at the top of the list. And then eventually that Square Cloud Winery will get back around up to the top. And then that would be a great time for me to call them again because I have called everybody else on the list first. That way I don't accidentally keep calling the same person frequently when I haven't even called any of the others that I've got downloaded. So it's a really good filter to use, especially in call labs. So, but simply put, if I call Boyce Lewis Installers, let's say I make my next phone call and I'm going to call and I want to talk to Marilyn Lewis. And phone call's over with, and let's say I set an appointment. So I spoke to the decision maker and I hit Marilyn Lewis. And so this would be an instance that I would want to put a next activity because what is my next activity? It is the appointment that I just set with Marilyn. So I'm going to hit save and add a next activity. And then I'm going to be able to input whatever that next activity is, which is a meeting. And then whatever date that meeting occurs, let's say it was, maybe Tuesday at 11 a.m. of the following week and it's going to be a first appointment with Marilyn, and then I can put any notes if I need to, but I'm going to save that activity. And so now when I go back to my lead information screen, if we look up at our tracker up at the top, you can actually see now it is no longer a qualified lead because I've just set an appointment with this. So if I go back to my lead screen, it has disappeared. Well, we just showed you the other example of where it would drop down to the bottom. Well, it's not down at the bottom. Well, reason being, if you remember, I filtered this at the beginning of my call lab to show me the leads that were qualified. Well, guess what? It's no longer going to be on this list because I don't want to call it again because I've already set an appointment with it because it is now considered a lead that has got a first appointment. So if I go to my leads and I have it show me the leads that have first appointment scheduled, there is that Boyce Lewis Installers that I just set an appointment with. All right, so very simple. You can see it works very similar to making drop calls, but there are some little tips and tricks that can help you be a little bit more fluid and just going from call to call and make it a little bit more efficient. And so I would encourage you to have those two filters that are set. And just to show you guys, on the 25th, there's that DM1 that we had just inputted. And so certainly make sure that you have those filters set. It could really make your life a whole lot easier. And um, hopefully that this can help you out and make you a little bit more efficient in call labs. And stay tuned for the next video.